Talking a little bit about my uncles. One of my uncles was track coach at Fort Hays State for 35, 40 years. Terry met him. We were going to Denver. I was with the Kansas State track team. We took a bunch of girls one winter out to Denver in my car and got stuck in a snowstorm. So we stopped at Hayes. My uncle Alex was there and we got snowed in. We said, "Can we stop and stay with you for a while?" We did. She was talking to him about her running. She was doing 120 miles a week. And he said, "You're an idiot." And this was Terry.
Jerry
And,
Jordan. Yeah.
and he said, "That's way too much mileage." And she was trying to run with all the K-State men. This was early 70s. Barry Anderson was her coach. And when we got back in the car, she said, "What does he know about running?" And I said, "He's in Hayes, Kansas." I said, "Actually, he got offers to coach all over the country. He was offered to be the coach at UCLA, but he just loved little small town America." And he had a lot of all Americans. Anyway, he set Terry straight. And what was ironic, Alex is in the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. When Terry went into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, I was there. And also Alex's brother, who threw the shot put in the 36 Olympics, he went into the Kansas Hall of Fame at the same year as Terry did. Sam had passed away, but I was there representing Sam and Terry. Anyway, gosh, Matthew, a lot of great stories, and I elaborate too much sometimes.
Today on the podcast, we're in Kansas with somebody who's had a long career in running, starting in high school, had a bit of a hiatus, returned to running, inspiring lots of people, running in his 70s and going forward. I think you'll enjoy meeting and getting to know Brad.
Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
For many decades, still involved, crisscross paths with many people. We'll be name dropping and story dropping with Brad Chatfield. Welcome today, Brad.
Thank you, Matthew. When I stumbled onto your site, and of course, Dave Waddle was the catalyst for this. Then I found Terry Anderson. We knew each other in the early 70s. We were introduced by a girl that we both knew. What a wonderful site you have, Matthew.
It's interesting. I interviewed some teammates of Dave's, and I mentioned in the episode that, boy, I'd love to track Dave down. He's not on Facebook.
No.
And of course, he listened to it because they were his friends, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I heard you want to interview me." So he made it really easy and very generous with his time. Of course, he's a great guy and he's got a great memory and great insights into telling what it was like then. And that's what this is about. At whatever level people were, we all go through these things. What's your origin story as an athlete, a competitor, a runner?
I grew up with a couple uncles, and they were all great athletes. Sam played football at Nebraska, threw the shot put at Nebraska University. He's number one draft choice in the NFL. My gosh, did he have stories? His brother played for Nebraska 4 years after that. He played in the Rose Bowl, scored the first touchdown in the Rose Bowl for Nebraska. I would sit around and listen to all their stories. Alex Francis was the head track coach at Hayes, and he looked at me and my short, muscular legs and said, "Oh, you're going to be a sprinter." I couldn't run a 14-second 100, so I ended up being a runner. They all said, "Are you going to go after golf or track?" I love telling this story. I tell my kids this all the time. I said, "My grandpa told me you can always play golf, but you can't run track all your life." And I thought, okay. So I went out for track.
What year was that? Where
About
were you? What was the
66,
school?
67,
Yeah.
66, 67. I thought I would go out for track because I can play golf the rest of my life. He wanted me to learn to play golf because I would play golf the rest of my life. Matthew, the ironic thing is I'm still running masters track meets every year. And so grandpa's long since passed away, but he was right, but I misunderstood his point.
Yeah. Okay. What was your personal drive for competition and how well did you do? How did that feed into it?
In school, I was not a great student. I struggled and I had to stay back in seventh grade. The class that I was with was tremendous athletes, and I was very little, very small. So I wasn't very competitive. So I stayed back because I struggled to be competitive and my grades suffered. Anyway, I stayed back. I went from being a follower to being a leader the next year. The kids embraced me. I was trying to prove something that I could be an athlete. Our facilities, the pole vault and high jump pit was all sand. We didn't have a track. We had to run around the junior high and the high school or out on the streets and practice the hurdles. And it was a downhill or an uphill. We didn't have any level ground anywhere. I was trying to prove myself because I came from an athletic family. I was the youngest of four boys, and my other brothers were all good athletes. And so I was driven by, I didn't want to fail my family.
When did you start having success in running?
In eighth grade in Kansas, in junior high, the longest event we ran was a quarter. I was never very fast. And our school sprint school record holder in the 100 was our best quarter man. So I never did do very well. When I was a freshman, I went out for track. I played football all 4 years. I went out for football, basketball, but then I went out for track and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I think I want to run the mile and 2 mile," which was ironic. The year before, I couldn't run more than a quarter by rules of the Kansas Sports Hall. My first meet, I went out and I ran a 5:17 in the mile. And the kid that was a sophomore, he was at the same meet. It was a triangular. He said, "Well, you just set the freshman record for the mile," broke my record. And I said, "Oh, okay." Then the next meet, we went to a big meet, had 15 teams. They lined me up. And of course, I had to get in my lane behind two other runners from our town because we all had to run the first and second turn until we could cut in. Took off and I ran a 450 mile. Second meet, second mile I ever ran. I was a star at that point. Everybody was going, "My gosh." I was only about 5'4" and 110 pounds. That was my big success. The school record holder was a senior, and I was about 8 seconds behind him in the school record. And we ran together all that year, and I had an incredible year that year.
How was your coaching? Did they know distance running? Did they know kids?
No, they were just managers. They would tell us to go out and run. We did fartleks. We would go out on the old roads and run between telephone poles. We would run, sprint, jog. And in between telephone, go out about 5 miles, come back doing the same thing all the way. And my gosh, 8 to 10 miles of fartlek work all the way out and back. And that's all we did.
Some parts out there are flat. What was it like?
But yeah, when you're driving around, yes, it's flat. It's very flat. They talk about flat. But when you're running, you find the hills. There were plenty of hills out here and steady hills.
And how did your school experience change after you repeated a year? How did your classroom experience
Oh,
change?
got much better because I was having success and I was able to compete. And so I didn't have to let my studies go. And the best part, Matthew, is my teammates were thrilled. Now, I will say this, one of my friends, we're still friends to this day. And they moved away after my freshman year, but his dad was a track star at Peru State, Nebraska, and he was the head football coach, the kid's dad. My other best friend, dad was the principal at the high school. And they realized that my athletic abilities, and they said, "Brad's going to be a great star." They told these kids that. And so my expectations were raised by the adults in my life.
Did they get you a good pair of shoes? Were you running spikes on cinders?
Our track was dirt. We actually had a football field they built in 1962, and they had a dirt track, and it was blacktop then by the time we were in high school when we were seniors. But no, the facilities they were good. Now, the track we went to when I ran my 450 mile was nice. It was in Concordia, south of ours. But no, the facilities, my gosh, we were on a track at the regional track meet or our league track meet the last week and gray rubberized. And actually, when I train and I run, I will run to the high school. We've got a rubberized track. And for my knees and ankles, I'll run a mile or two over there and then I'll do 4 miles. And everybody said, "Isn't this boring?" I said, "No, because it helps my legs. Because at
Yeah.
71 years old, it's a different world."
Okay, everybody says Brad's going to be a star. What were your expectations for the rest of your high school career, and what did you accomplish?
Matthew, this is one of the stories I tell the kids that I'm working with now at the high school and the junior high. I became so full of myself and I absolutely ruined listening to Dave Waddle's podcast. He talked about he was a 450 miler in high school or junior high or whatever. And he got in a full ride scholarship when he was running a 450. And Matthew, I never did get any better. I tell the story.
Wow.
I ran cross country after my freshman year. I ran cross country as a sophomore, but I played football and I went to football practice all the time. I never practiced. I would jump on the cross country bus and I would go to the meets and I'd win the meets. I was so full of myself. And the school record holder in the mile and the cross country, he graduated my freshman year and he took me on a run before the regional track meet my freshman year. And we did 10 miles an hour. We were running 6-minute miles for 10 miles. I only made it 8. But he wrote in my yearbook, he said, "Brad, I wanted to know if you were for real." And he said, "You are better than I ever was at your age." But Matthew, I tell the kids over and over again when we're running together, and I said, "You guys needed to be doing more work." And I tell these kids, we had a kid that got 4 firsts the other day at a track meet, at our league track meet. And I said, "DeMarcus, do not let this go to your head. You're a kid. You're a 7th grader, and you just did miraculous. You set school records in every event." But I said, "Don't think you've arrived. You've got to continue to work." And I run with them, and they know because I'm working as hard as I can, and it's not pretty. The kids respond to it.
Why do you think that happened? Did you need a coach? Did you need a mentor?
My mentor graduated, and the kids were telling me, and they were lining me up the next year in track, saying, "Okay, we're looking at 10 points here. We're looking at this and that." And Matthew, I never got any better, and it got bad. It got bad, and I had a terrible experience. By the time I was a junior, I quit. I was running track, and I was being injured. I wasn't working like I should. I made all the classic mistakes that I see kids make. And you know what? This year, I'm having great success with some of the kids because they believe in me. Because when I tell them the stories and we're running, they absolutely absorb it all. And I said, "Don't do this."
All right. As you come up on graduation, what was your outlook for going to college and the outlook of you as a runner?
Matthew, at that stage, my running abilities and everything were gone. I absolutely left it. And it wasn't until I was about 30, honestly, I got an offer to compete in a local fundraiser. It was where I met Dave Waddle. I met Super Bowl MVPs. It was a 10 sport competition that a rich oil man in Wichita put together. He brought in the greatest athletes in the world from Dave Waddle, basketball players, football players, hockey players.
What was the decathlon? What were the 10 events?
The 10 events, we had a bike and carry because the pro athletes, they wouldn't let them ride their bikes. We played golf. We played 9 holes of golf. We had bike racing. We had devil take the hindmost. We had hill sprints. We had swimming. We finished up with a European cross country meet because they filled up pastures full of water. We had to run through mud and everything. And those were what I excelled in, though, because Matthew, I got back into shape at 35, and I haven't looked back from 35 on. But I tell these kids, don't ever doubt yourself.
How did you get invited to this event with Dave Waddle and Super Bowl.
A friend of mine was putting together a 5K run and a 10K run out in Syracuse, Kansas, on the Colorado border, a town of about 100 people. He invited Jim Hirschberger. He was on the Wheaties box and all that stuff, and he did multi-sports events, but he was a great promoter. They invited him out to run because he did run. He was a runner. I was one of the sponsors that helped put on the event in Syracuse, Kansas. So I got to go to the sponsors dinner. I met Jim Hirschberger, and then also Jim Hirschberger's companion, the guy that drove him everywhere, was Jim Ryan's track coach, the guy Edmondson. I met him at the event, and I told him, I said, you remember the Superstars competition on ABC or CBS that they always had all these athletes, and Bob Seagren and all those people won it? I was telling him I could have won that event. I could have won the Superstars because I was a good multi-sport. Anyway, so they remembered my name. So when they were putting together the event in Wichita, they wanted to have some people that Jim could beat in the amateur division because they had all the professionals. So they wanted me as an amateur because I told them I was just really good, which in 4 years, we did that competition. I proved to be very competitive in all sports. And that's
What was the circumstances that got you to get back in shape? And were you daily training?
yeah, this event, the event that we had in Syracuse, Kansas, and we met Jim Hirschberger. He was putting this together for himself, but he needed 20 other athletes that he could compete with. And I got lucky enough. Matthew, I will tell you, at the time I was working, I had a business. I was working for a company. I was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And it was horrible.
Great.
It was horrible. They called me at Thanksgiving and said, hey, would you want to do this? And I said, let me think about it over the Thanksgiving break. And they said, when is it? And they said, it's going to be in June. I called them back after Thanksgiving and said, I'll do it. And I was overweight and out of shape. And I quit smoking. I started running. And I got to where I was running 5Ks at 35 years old. I was running them in the 14 and 15s, and I was competitive again. And it was
Man.
great.
Okay, skipped over the 70s. You ran in the 60s and you picked this up in the mid 80s. Were you a fan of the sport? Did you know who Dave Waddle was apart from the other
Oh,
athletes?
absolutely. The neat thing about it is Billy Mills, which I met and visited with, and Dave Waddle. And I love the Olympics. Of course, the Olympics to me were just track and field and maybe some basketball. I saw Billy Mills until Dave Waddle did his 800 in 72. I thought Billy Mills's race was the most spectacular race I've ever seen. But what Dave did was just, I'm got goosebumps telling the story. And I've got that saved on my phone and I watch it and I show it to the kids all the time. That's how I train, just through other people.
What was the running world like then out in the Midwest? Did you start road racing?
Yeah, I was running still some. 5Ks were just coming about. We had a track across my apartment. I lived in Manhattan. That's where I met Terry Anderson, Jordan. I would go out and run around the track just to keep it going, just to keep my juices going because I loved it. 5Ks, I can remember going to events and politicians would be there and to try and campaign, and 5Ks were it. Now, I stumbled into Masters Track and Field about that same time and started wrecking the bike
Okay, what year are you saying you got into Masters?
in the 80s. In the
Yep.
80s.
And that's usually 35. I think they now have some submasters at age 30, but that was 35 and over.
Yes, yes. And so after I did the Hirschberger thing and I got into it really heavily, met so many great athletes out here and they encouraged me. And I've got great friends, some guys from Iowa, and I need to get all their names because I have trouble remembering names. Now, Matthew, the reason I said running in your 70s, I'm 71 now. So that's really where I'm at. So it's legit. It's legit.
Your PR as a freshman was 450.
Yes.
But you're running 5Ks at a good clip there. What was your mile time when you got into Masters competing?
In the 530s. And that's when I was about 50 when I actually started running in the Masters. Of course, I didn't know about the age group All Americans, and I started hitting that. And Tim Wiggins is a good friend. They run with the Southern Cal running team, and the guy from Iowa that sets world records. All these guys are like 5 years ahead of me, so we don't have to compete against each other. Every 5 years, we're reborn again. I was running competitively. These guys helped me. I became an All-American in the mile at Wichita in a race. There's been so much of my life has crossed through Wichita, Kansas, from the Hirschberger thing, the 10-sport, multi-sport event. And most of my running has been in Topeka and Wichita. And it's good. We've got a lot of good organizers that do great events. My God, the community, the running community pushes us and supports each other. And the people
Well,
I've met.
let's talk about you as a runner first. Running shoes you can buy now.
Yeah.
While you were through this, but by the time you really got into it, running shoes had blossomed. Those races you were getting into, apart from track masters, I want to just get a feel for that era that you were in terms of how big were the packs? Were there ever aid stations? Were you running any longer races that had aid stations?
Oh, I ran 2 marathons. I've tried to qualify for the Centennial Boston, and I ran that in Kansas City. And yes, they had everything. Matthew, I'll tell you, when I run races, marathons, 5Ks, I thank everybody that's at the aid stations that are volunteering, because we couldn't do it without the volunteers. Shoes, I remember I ran at the KU relays. Now, that was my best mile ever when I was 50 some years old, and I got last in the race because I didn't run with Jim Ryan. I mean, but it was the same track that Jim Ryan was on. But I got last. I think I ran a 5:38, something like that. Anyway, they were all masters, but I bought a new pair of shoes there, a new pair of spikes. First time I ever ran in spikes and on a track. No, I take that back. I ran with spikes in high school, the first 3 years that I ran. And I got down to where I was running in the 10s for the 2 mile and track my freshman year. I was always competitive, but yeah, the support for running in Kansas was tremendous for me. I ran in California. I did go to California. I ran a number of races out there, and Kansas is right there with them. The scenery is better in California.
How was your mileage? What mileage were you doing once you became a steady runner again?
Yeah, I would go out and do 10 miles. I do 5 to 6, 7 miles to 2 and 3 times a week now. Some of my friends, they're 70 years old and 75, they're telling me you don't need to do that much mileage at this age. So we're starting to adjust a little bit for the age. I'd go out and do 10, 12 miles once or twice a month, but I was always 5, 6 miles whenever I went out and ran, and I'd do it 4 or 5 times. And I was just doing mileage. I wasn't doing sprint quarters. I know I take that back. When I was training to try and get my All-American mile, I was doing quarters and 300s and halves.
What's involved when you say the All-American mile? What
But
organization's putting that?
Roadrunners, National Masters National. I got a bunch of magazines out in the other room. They sponsor All-American standards. They have standards for each age group and for each event. Actually, I'm going to try the pole vault this afternoon. I'm working with some of the kids. I saw that the 6 feet was the Masters All-American standard for the pole vault. So the kids told me, said, Coach, you need to try this afternoon. So they're going to make me try the pole vault this afternoon at practice.
So have you never done the full vault?
No.
6 feet sounds low.
I know. And they're
it's pretty high. It's
Just
pretty
grab-
high.
But they're telling me just grab the pole, get my hands in the right place, pull myself up, and let the pole throw me over. So we'll
Yeah.
see. I'll report
It's a
on
core.
that later.
It's a core exercise. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And core's everything. Yeah, I take good care of myself because I realized when I hit 35 and I did that MVP competition in Wichita, my God, I was aging fast. And I had a doctor one time when I was training, I was having some injuries, and I said, what's wrong? What's going on? And he said, you're not 16 anymore. You're 35 years old. But it hasn't stopped me, Matthew.
Let's talk about the idea of your pursuit of this become obviously a passion again. You mentioned running in California. What was your travel? Were you getting just races locally? How often were you traveling to race?
Matthew, anytime I went anywhere, I would get online, and that's the best part about the internet, and find a race. I would go to Dallas to visit family. I'd find a race. I went to California. I found a race. I went to Colorado Springs on vacation. I found a race. I would get online and find a race everywhere I went. I ran in Ireland. I ran in Liverpool. We took a cruise around and I found races. Any place I go, I find a race. And what's wonderful, I'll get to the front of the pack and they'll look at me. I'm 5'7". I'm shrinking actually, and I'm a little bit overweight, but I will line up and they said, you need to be back at the finish. I'll come in there and I'll beat every one of those guys that said, you need to be further back. You shouldn't be up here. I love just making people eat their words. And
There's that competitive streak. And yeah, talking about how you were disappointed with the no improvement in school, how did that affect you psychologically that over time, processing that and looking at now you're time driven, achievement driven in running, and you're quite a different person now.
oh, it changed my life. Terry Anderson, Terry Jordan. I used to run with her, Matthew, along this line of questioning. I'm one of those guys when I was younger that would say, oh, I could have been great. I could have. I could have done this. And of course, now I listen to Dave Waddle's podcast that you had, and I was parallel to him when I was a freshman in high school to what he was doing. And look what he did. But I never got any
Well,
better. So
Well,
Terry,
the famous line in Once a Runner from Frank Shorter. So, how'd you know I was a 4:30 high school miler? He said, we were all 4:30 high school milers.
yep. But anyway, Terry told me one time, she said, I don't ever want to hear that. You could have. You either are or you're not. Go prove it. And I went, oh my gosh. So those were, Terry was coaching then. She told me, she said, you'll never be any good if you think you could have been good. You just need to do it. So that's where my competitive juices started back then. And that was in the 70s. That was like 1972 or 3. And I became driven at that point. Even for 20 years, I would still run thinking, I think I can still do this. And I could. My resting heart rate is in the 30s. I have parents come up to me when I'm coaching kids and they said, do you think my kid can do this? And I said, he's got to work harder. I said, but what's his heart rate? You ever done this heart rate on everything? I said, you need to be able to do negative splits. And I tell my kids negative splits all the time and they learn on it now. I said, coach, I ran negative splits in my workout. And I said, good, do it again. Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but my competitiveness is healthy.
As you're racing around now and you like the lineup at the front,
Yeah.
but who did you meet on the racing circuit? On these races, some local, whoever showed up, were there elite runners dropping into these races? Was it community? Were they growing in pack size?
Yeah, that was always the attraction. And I never really did want to get in their way because what other sport at 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, you can't go play football with the stars. You can't go play basketball on the stars on the same court or field. When you go to some of these events and the elite runners, of course, now I did not go up the front of the elite runners in those situations when you had thousands and thousands of runners. I would go back with the sign and get in my pace area. But no, I never acquainted with them. I would go up and like I said, Billy Mills he wasn't running. He was there promoting a particular race that we were in. And I just went over and I introduced myself. And I always tried to ask him, I said, did so-and-so and things like that. But no, I never did. But my biggest thing was I'm in the same race with, and Matthew, I can't think of any of the names at this time, but I knew I was in the race with some of the world's best up front.
What kind of business were you in those decades?
I was in the financial services business. I was in the insurance and very successful. I liked what I was doing. It gave me the freedom to come and go. And I was pretty much my own boss, but people paid me a lot of money. I managed people. I managed Western Kansas and 15 offices and 45 people and stuff like that. That was fun. I loved helping people be better. And everybody that worked with me was hopefully always better.
Did you talk running with all your colleagues and
Oh,
subordinates?
absolutely. Yes. All the subordinates. And I tell the stories. Athletics, competitiveness works in business too. Yeah, it transferred straight across. Again, I'd say do better, practice, study, get your education, go back and get your master's degree in CLU as a chartered life underwriting. I had that. I did all the stuff that I did to make myself a little bit more authoritarian, have a little more clout, and instead of just my BS, because Matthew, I'm full of BS. I'll tell you that.
Or we'll let people judge for themselves, but
Okay.
you're rolling right along here. How did you make the step into coaching? What was your contact with kids in any organized fashion before you somehow made this jump into coaching?
Great question. I was in the insurance business. I moved back to my hometown to raise my kids, to give them a chance to compete and do different things. I love my school, by the way. My Facebook page is just full of all kinds of stuff. But I was asked, because I ran, small town, I would run on the streets. People see me all the time. And I had a little Facebook page and people followed it. But they asked me, hey, we've got 2 vans. We need a van driver to go to the meets. Would you like to go with us and help? So actually, they needed a van driver. But I ran with the kids. I said, can I run with the kids? So I always said I was a professional runner because they were paying me to be a coach and drive the van. But I would go out and run every workout with all the kids. And it was successful. I was working with some of the kids, and I had a great coach that he was a great track and cross country coach. He said, every kid is different. You cannot coach them the same. And every kid's out here for different reasons. Either the kids, their parents said, you're going to go out for something. You can't just do nothing after school. The kids were trying to stay in shape for basketball. But I had one senior, he was a good basketball player, and had an injury. And I was able to run behind him and see how his style and correct his running style. And he got a little bit better. His knee quit hurting, but he got better. And he ended up being a teacher and a coach. Said to him, you need to be a leader. You're the only senior we got on this team. I know you're out here just to stay in shape for basketball, but I said, you need to be a leader. And he took off and became a better runner. And he's told me, yeah, I became a better coach because you helped me realize the importance that I can't just be here. I need to be here. And that's what I do with all my kids. Anyway, I coached for 3 or 4 years with 2 different coaches. The other coach retired. And when the new coach took over, they said, we need you. So I stayed there for about 5 years, and then I moved. And then again, I got back into it again when I was in my 60s because they saw me running, and the local school district said, hey, would you be willing to help coach cross country and track? And I said, sure.
So what's the dynamic there? Which part of the team were you taking? You were always part of a team coaching system?
Correct. I was the assistant running coach. And then we had the pole vault coach, and we had the field coaches and the weight coaches and stuff like that. But they asked, again, the head coach, who was very young, he stayed on the track and did with work with some of the sprinters. But then we would send the distance runners, middle distance runners and distance runners out. I would run with them, and I would talk to them, tell them stories, coach them, chew them out, say, if I'm beating, you guys aren't working hard enough. Because I said, I'm 60 years old, and I've since turned 70. But yeah, Matthew, it's incredibly rewarding. And I'm actually faded into the junior high ranks, the 7th and 8th graders. And my gosh, are they soaking it up. And I've told them stories about how I made mistakes. And the first person that I had earlier this season was an 8th grade girl that I had in cross country when she was a 7th grader and 8th grader. And I said, somebody needs to take the lead here. You guys are jogging your workouts. You need to be running. You need to be breathing hard when you're done. None of you guys are doing the workouts. And I said, the coaches are giving you great workouts and you're dogging it. I said, somebody needs to step up. This little 8th grade girl stepped up, and she was out running all the boys. They would run, a half, and she would go to the front and carry the load. And then finally, I chewed this one kid. The kid got 4 first the other day at the last track meet. I said, DeMarcus would be back in the middle, just visiting and jogging along. And I said, DeMarcus, you're better than this. Get out here. He would take off, and he took off and blitzed last half of the quarter. And Matthew, it was beautiful. And I said, man, that was good. And I called him out, and I called him over quietly and chew them out, because I don't want to chew them out in front of the other kids. But they're responding. And as a coach, it's just really rewarding to see, first of all, the young lady embarrass all the other guys. And now everybody is starting to run faster at the workouts, and they get it.
Everybody is different, and your running style certainly personally may not fit these kids. What about goal setting and the kids at that age? Are you working with them? What do they look at? How far ahead is their vision of what they're going to do in the sport?
I talk to them about my story and the rest of their lives. And I tell them the golf story that my grandpa told me. You think, go out for golf because you can do that the rest of your life. You can do this running the rest of your life, and your health will thank you for it. But I said, stay competitive and do it, and do every workout. Be careful, watch your hamstrings, watch your injuries, learn your body. And I coach it, Matthew, as if they're going to do this the rest of their lives. And they all tell me, said, Coach, we won't quit running. We won't quit running.
Oh, it's nice. Yeah, it's nice. That's a nice legacy to have. Yeah, if you have
Yeah.
that you've changed lifestyle. What about accomplishments and rivalry? And I'll tell you one thing, certainly those of us, I've coached various things. I've coached adults, I've coached basketball, I've coached a bunch of things. And I've been very lucky. There are some horror stories where people get into coaching and say, I thought it was about sports, but it's about parent management. How's that part of coaching been for you?
Great question, because it's small town. They all know me. I'm easy to get to. And the parents say, oh, my son, my daughter, they just love you. Along that line, the kids all respond to me. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to say this, but some of the other teachers, I substitute teach also. And the kids, I'm their favorite. Oh, Mr. Chatfield, you're our favorite. The parents tell me that the kids just love me. Now, I will go talk to the parents. I had two seventh graders at their first cross country meet, got top 10, got medals. Their first cross country run they ever did. After we got home and got off the bus and I was walking with them, I showed them the Dave Waddle video. And I said, you guys can be great. You are already good. You can be great. And they said, do you want to be great? Do you want to be a great runner? Basically, both of them said, no. I said, do you realize what you just did today? Do you realize what you just did? And I said, the world is the rest of your life you can do. Said, no. Okay, now they're freshmen now. It's been 3 years. I went out and talked to, because I know where their parents, one of them owns a lumberyard, went out and talked to them, and I told them about their son. He's having some issues. He's having stuff. And I said, I just want you to know that he's good. And then this other kid, Matthew, they both responded because I've talked to their parents, and the parents work with me. And I say it's great. Parents can be a problem, but every parent.
Let's not name any. Let's not name any names, because some of them are going to see this video. But how do you deal with that?
Every parent that I work with thanks me. I've never had a problem with a parent. Now, I coach from the heart. I coach from the heart. I told them, you want me to be a running coach? I said, how do you coach running? I said, I tell them to just run faster and get to the finish line first. And I said, I don't know the technical. Now, I talked to them. They had to teach me how to breathe when I was a freshman, because when I would come around the last 100 yards, I'd take a deep breath and hold my breath to the finish line. Some of the other kids noticed and said, he's not breathing. So now when I'm running the last 100, I'll go, anyway, my mouth breather. But anyway, no, the parents have been super supportive of me. Matthew, I walked into the lunchroom the other day before they were having a lunch before they got on the bus to go to a track meet. And it embarrassed me. I walked in, and it was just the 7th and 8th graders, just the junior high. They gave me a standing ovation just for showing up, and humbled the hell out of me.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that is memorable and makes it all worthwhile, I imagine.
And I told them on the bus, when they got on the bus, don't do that ever again. Because I said the other teachers that were monitoring the lunchroom were a little perturbed that, because I'm a substitute teacher and I don't do any work. I just manage kids. It's super rewarding. My life right now has never been better.
That's very cool. And it's interesting how running has been the thread
Oh,
that had such a big influence on you, including the failures. So you obviously make a great increase in value of that by using that to teach and inspire and motivate kids.
I tell them all the time, you want to hear a story? I said, I was an idiot. I was an idiot. I don't want you. We have at the beginning of every season, cross country and track, we'll have the parents meeting with them. And I tell all the parents I have for 3 years, I said, the only thing I'm here for is to make your kid better at everything he does. I said, I'm going to teach life lessons. I teach running, and running is work your butt off and run harder and run faster and run smarter. Be aware of your body and don't ignore injuries. But I said, there's a difference between injury and soreness. I said, your kids are going to come in and tell me that, oh, this hurts and this hurts. And I said, okay, can you not walk? Can you not do this? But anyway, I got great support and I'm an open book. They know where I'm coming from and I won't sugarcoat anything. And I think the kids and the parents appreciate that. And I do my best.
You've had good friendships with, for example, Terry Jordan, a national world-class athlete in the 70s. The sport now has changed. You were a fan then. What do you think about the change in the sports, the commercialization, the money, the professionalization of the running sport now? How does it look to you reflecting back now?
A great question. You got to be in favor of change because I look back at the Olympics and I look back at the 60s and I know my uncle who was a track coach at Pan Am and he said, they need money. These kids need money. They can't train. We're competing in the world stage where other countries support them. They send them to schools. They send them to academies. Yeah, it has changed, but it's for the better. Now, where money goes, evil follows too. They're still cheating. There's still some things. You talk about football. I'm a big football fan. And my gosh, what's going on in football and basketball about every year? There's no loyalty. And it's a change. And I know you, as coaches, you've got to explain that to kids, keep them as pure as you can, but take the money. Take the money so you can train. Because my God, I saw some of the kids when I was working with Terry and we were driving them out in a car and we had 5 or 6 people sitting in a 4-passenger car driving in a snowstorm to go to Denver. Why didn't we have a school bus or a team bus or something like that? But the changes are inevitable. They're coming fast, but you've got to work with it and manage it. But you've got to keep your integrity because the money can sure mess it up.
What's on your racing horizon then? What are you going to run this summer or this year?
I'm finding some half marathons. I was all over the internet last night. I was trying to find some stuff. I just did a 5K here down in Manhattan. It's called Run for the Roses. I don't know if it had something. They had got a rose garden, but I think it had something to do with the Kentucky Derby. But anyway, and I got first in my age group. Of course, I was the only one running at that age. I always tell everybody, I said, I'm going to be a world record holder someday because I'm going to try and outlive my competition. But instead of world record when I'm 110 or something like that.
My first steeplechase was age 61, and I looked and said, there's only going to be 4 of us out here. I'll have a go at that. Yeah.
You asked earlier about how they support me. Wichita, the track meets, we used to have a indoor meet in January and February, and they always had a outdoor meet. And they had one in the spring and then one in the fall. And they set up a steeplechase just for me when I turned 60 because they changed it to a 2,000 meter instead of a 3,000 meter.
Yeah.
So
that was good news. I like how that shift worked. Yeah.
yes, but the organizers, Matthew, went and set up the whole course just for me. And I didn't do well. It was hard. From experience, I thought, oh, this will be easy because it's only 2,000. It's shorter and I can do it. Yeah, my time wasn't good, and I was the only one in the event. But I got a great picture of one. My wife took a picture as I jumped. I hit the top of the water jump and I went down and I landed both feet just short, which was fine. But I had water splash up, clear up past my hips. And it was one of those pure waters. I mean, it didn't break. And so I looked like a light bulb. My legs were in a light bulb. And that's one of my favorite pictures of running. I've got it on a lot of my sites. But
Well, maybe we can use that for the podcast episode cover photo. Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah, I got it. I save all kinds of stuff.
The key thing here is to get an insight into the individuals. Your personality comes right across right away and slowly.
I do a lot of public speaking, and actually, I got a deal today where somebody wants me to come to their church and talk, basically do a sermon. They didn't call it a sermon. We just want you to do a talk. And I said, it'll be from my heart and it'll be about my running. And that's what I do. I've had many people and I've written some papers. And they said, oh my gosh, your heart comes through about everything you do. And I said, that's all I've got. I've got a strong heart and I use it.
Is your resting pulse still in the 30s? Mine's creeped up. I'm in mid 40s now.
Yep. No, it's creeped up into the 40s. Yeah, it is. But as of now, and I say that, it's on my Garmin, my watch. It'll record all that stuff and it'll show the range at the end of the day. And I'll have a 39 or a 37. That's a great question because now that I'm 71, it is in the 40s on a regular basis.
Well, a lot of people will take that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm thrilled to have it. That's the thing. I don't take anything for granted anymore. I love what I do and I love hearing myself. I love telling stories. And Matthew, you've given me a tremendous outlet. I hope I haven't wasted a lot of your time.
No, this would be good. I think Dave Waddle will like hearing you as a fan of his, and Terry Jordan, who I just met when I did the interview with her. She's a neighbor of a friend of mine. But everybody in this community, running community, is, of course, unique. In my experience, certainly has been people that either I haven't seen for 30 years or I never knew before, seem like old friends at the end of an hour.
Oh, absolutely. And real quick, like Dave Waddle, I competed with him for 4 years, running and everything, and he got better. I told the story. I said, yeah, my claim to fame is I beat Dave Waddle. And I told him that. And he said, just laughed. I said, good, I'm glad I was able to do something. He was injured. The rest of the story, I always tell that story. But I got to know him. I got to know his wife and his children. They were very young at that time. But anyway, I got to go to Rhodes College. I drove through there and I saw him and visited with him. Oh, my phone's going dead. Hey, Matt, let's touch base again. And like I said, the best part is friendships that you make. And Dave Waddle, I feel, is one of my friends. I will bombard you with stuff because our local history museum for Republic County wants to do an exhibit on me because to inspire all the kids and future kids. But hey, Matthew, I better let
That's
you go.
great.
And we will
All
talk again soon.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Brad.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.